Hey everyone, how's it going? Alistair here, and 8 feet to my left, as ever, is the amazing Marguerite.
Hello,
Oh!
everyone.
Oh!
Yes, I
We
know.
rehearsed that.
Right? We did. We practiced. That's right. We are going to try a little bit of dual camera tonight. So keep your fingers crossed and hopefully the bandwidth will stand up for us.
It's almost like we had something planned.
Almost. We might.
Anyway,
Yes, exactly. Hang on. I have to remember where the main camera button is. I'm not used to this. Okay.
I must confess the whole time the countdown was going down, the only thing I could think of were the words, "Hello, welcome to Search and Rescue with me, Werner Herzog. There's no story. It is just you and I in the woods, alone, near a log. The log is on fire. Have a good night." And also drowning. Because of capitalism. Later I will punch Klaus Kinski in the face. He actually did that. But, yeah, anyway, hi, I'm Alistair. How are you all?
I'm Marguerite, and I'm just tempted to leave it here while we're chatting for a few minutes.
I think you should.
Should I? Really?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's very kind of heart to heart. Like,
See, I can just like,
hi,
hi, honey.
hon.
We're still trying. See, what's really weird about this is when we first set up all the streaming, Alistair is sitting at my computer, and I am sitting at Alistair's computer for just, running the chat. But now we're both on camera, and it's like, should we trade back? I don't know yet. So, yes. Hello. Good evening. How's everyone doing? Welcome to the stream.
Welcome, as my learned colleague says, to the stream. For those of you who are new, there are a couple of things which we do every time. The first is an opening monologue, the second is a story, and the third is shenanigans. So shenanigans will be Magnus Archives related fan fiction or art or something similar, much like the amazing crossword by T, the fan art that opened the stream tonight. If you haven't, go back to that, and we'll put the link in the show notes, which will be live after we're done, and take a look at the detail built into it, because it is a thing of beauty. It is truly wonderful. So,
We have such shenanigans for you tonight.
oh my goodness.
OM.
Yes, indeed. So what we're going to do is the opening monologue, which will be an excuse for you to get a drink, get some food, get situated, feed your pets, all that kind of good stuff. And then we will touch on what's been happening with us this week. We will ensure that you find out what Chungus is wearing, and indeed who Chungus is wearing.
That wasn't ominous or anything.
I hadn't thought the scientific name until it arrived with the label P. Lucas. There is Peter Lucas the spider as well as Lucas Peter the dog. Now,
I am going to need photos.
that is amazing.
P. Lucasi? We absolutely need some more information about the Peter Spider.
Yes.
Peter Spider? Peter Spider.
Exactly.
Oh no.
Then we are going to do a couple of search and rescue pieces. There's actually 5 outstanding, and I don't think we're going to get to all of them this week. And then there will be shenanigans.
OMG, the shenanigans.
Oh boy. Without further ado, though, let's jump straight into this week's opening monologue. Hearthstone's Uther Lightbringer, Absolute Lad, by Nate Crowley, reviews editor at Rock Paper Shotgun, and Houseband here. Every month, as part of its Book of Heroes business, Hearthstone releases a short single-player adventure telling the life story of one of the big characters off of Warcraft via card-based boss battles. They're lovely, and I really like them. The new Book of Heroes just became available and features everyone's favourite mellifluous fantasy bigot, the Paladin Uther Lightbringer. That's corpse one.
I was gonna say, what's our corpse count tonight? Whoever's on the corpse count tonight is gonna get a award.
Uther is a sort of cross between Obi-Wan Kenobi and Bean Dad, who in Warcraft lore does such a piss... Yeah, now, I want 2 corpse counts today.
Remember Bean Dad? It's only been, 8 days?
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Who in Warcraft lore does such a piss-poor job of mentoring young Prince Arthas that the geezer only goes and becomes the Lich King. Over the 8 battles of Uther's story, the Paladin himself narrates these events from his perspective, and some insights are gleaned. Uther used to be a priest. Uther really properly despises orcs in a way that actually gets a bit uncomfortable to listen to. But most of all, Uther used to be an absolute mad lad. What we have in this here Book of Heroes is a lovely example of something lost in translation. You see, the Warcraft IP, and Hearthstone in particular, has always taken a sort of Irish bar in Japan approach to capturing the vague Britishness of generic high fantasy. See, for example, the nightmare of an accent emitted by the innkeeper character who hosts Hearthstone itself. This instance of the UK and the US being two nations separated by a common language, the crux of the matter is the word lad.
I should just point out really quick that there are content warnings for swears and British bants/culture here. So if there are references you don't get, ask in the chat. We'll take care of you.
Which Uther uses a lot. I can see where they chose lad. Actually, he has an example here. As a lad, I was a cleric in the Church of the Holy Light, but my mentor already had plans for me. I can see why they chose lad, as it feels like something a knight of oldie might say, after all. And I can see that if Uther spoke in a broad East Midlands accent, as I think he should, you know what, let's hear what that might sound like. As a lad, I was a cleric in the Church of the Holy Light, but my mentor already had plans for me. With sincere apologies to everyone I know from the East Midlands. Moving on.
Content warning.
Accents!
Also, it's not East Midlands if you don't say Meduck.
Indeed.
Try again.
As a lad, I was a cleric in the Church of the Holy Light, Meduck, but my mentor already had plans for me. There we go.
There we go. Now that's as offensive as it could possibly be. Well done.
The aristocrats. But this bellowing aristocrat getting misty-eyed about having once been a lad really sticks out like a sore thumb, dialect-wise. Isolated from any of the regional accents where it fits in the intended sense, it registers to me as lad in the sense of someone who roars the word legend a lot, steals traffic cones, and goes on holiday to the Balearic Islands to be sick everywhere. God help me, the mental image just really made me laugh, and it got even better when he started calling Arthras a lad as well. You're a good lad, just a bit hot-headed, think before you act. Easy lad, brave as you are, you can't hope to defeat him all by yourself. We've done well, lad. This was a sound victory. At that moment, I realised my worst enemy was the small lad I had raised to follow the light. But still...
That's right! Lad is British for bro!
Lad is British for bro. Like, bruh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lad. Bro. Exactly.
Once I got thinking about this Uther the lad bit, I couldn't stop. I mean, it works so well. You can't spell paladin without lad, can you? And for the light's sake, Uther's hero power in the game just summons a bloke. Indeed, one of the recurring deck archetypes for Paladin is known as Dude Paladin, since it revolves around lining up a load of generic blokes and having them hit things. Uther's life is a perpetual stag weekend. See that massive book he carries around with him everywhere? That's the Lad Bible. Today's reading is from the book of Kevsey, chapter way, and concerns the parable of St. Ryan the Ledge shitting himself in the capo. I bet he calls this bloke the Archbishop of Banterbury, and there is a picture of an actual archbishop.
There you go, Zelia. Archbishop of Banterbury joke. Cheeky Nando's on the fly.
But of course, as Uther himself confesses, it was the young Arthas who was the real lad in his story. Arthas is proper mental, he is. Destroyed one too many beasts, lagers, on a night out and passed out on the doorstep after half an hour of trying to unlock his front door with the wrong end of the key. Got so cold, he turned into a skeleton. Legend.
Wow, I need a cheeky Nando's now.
It's been ages as well. We might need one.
Yeah.
Thanks as ever to the magnificent Nate. His new book is out, and there will be a link for it in the show notes. And you kind of need it if you haven't already picked it up.
Scott, they have both popped collars and red trousers and deck shoes.
Yes.
Because that's what they wear.
Yes, because...
You can see them coming for a mile on the South Bank, and I don't miss them at all.
Because somehow this island got ram-raided by Miami Vice 30 years ago and has never recovered from it.
It's where Miami Vice offloaded all of its wardrobing, I guess, after a decade. You know how Japan used to be where the 80s were exported for a while? I think it's a similar concept.
Shoved Duran Duran and Susie and the Banshees on a container ship. Get in there, there's lots of coke. What?
Hi, everybody. How are we doing?
Anyway, what's new with us this week? Well, we're getting used to the fact that we're back at work because one of us has a sexy new job.
Yes, I do. Should I switch to the other thing?
I think, well, I mean, you're going to talk for a minute, so you should be on camera.
Really? Okay. Hang on, I have to push all the buttons. It gets a little confusing. Yes, I started my new job this week. That's about all I was going to say. Do we really need to put me on camera for that?
Well, yeah, because you're really pretty.
Well, you're really cute, too.
Okay, all right then.
Okay.
So, yeah, Marguerite started a new job, and we're slowly getting used to being back at work. And I think that's about it.
Also, we do... Ooh, hold on, let me do camera for that. Oh, I'm going to have to rearrange all my buttons. This is getting terribly confusing. Just one more thing we wanted to add. We are in Act 3 of the Magnus Archives, and we know there's a big Magnus population with us here tonight. We love you all. But let's keep the chat spoiler-free, please. It's okay to talk about the trailer for the Act 3.
Yes, let's talk about the trailer for Act 3, shall we?
Shall we talk about it? Yes. It's okay to talk it up through the trailer, but let's not talk about if you have early access to any of the new episodes, because of course we all want to enjoy the finale together. And I'm on episode like 174. I am so behind. I'm less worried about spoilers, but let's keep it spoiler free.
We know you're all very well behaved, awesome people, but at the same time, it's like that bit when you go on a plane. Remember doing that, where someone would always have to go, this door, don't open it.
Exactly. That is correct, Shiny Opals. I was, in fact, in the trailer.
Yes, you should talk about that.
Okay.
Peter Lucas who? I only know unnamed.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we'll talk about it more maybe in the future.
We could interview you as a guest.
No.
About the Magnus Archives.
No. Lordy, no. No. Exactly.
We'll come up with something.
Okay. Go back to being the talent, would you? I'm getting embarrassed.
Okay, all right. Okay. So that's pretty much what's new with us this week. And just before we dive into Search and Rescue, go back and listen, because, oh my God, I listened to it and I was like,
Really?
What?
You were surprised?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
I knew you were doing it. I just didn't know what context you were doing it in, and I'm very, very intrigued. Yes, thank you, Scott. We continue to work on the clock app.
Yeah, should we talk about the clock app?
Yes, because Zalia got us a tin whistle.
Should we talk about the fact that in 12 days he has almost 25,000 views and over 3,000 followers?
Thank you so much, Zalia.
And Zalia bought him an amazing whistle, which I think I have to hand. Why am I doing this? I don't know. Yes, so the clock app links will be in the show notes.
It's an actual boatswain's call. You're amazing.
We're having an awful lot of fun with it. Right now...
Now you see, Jax, thank you, because Clock Dick Peter Lucas is very aware of the sea shanties.
We have a whole list of the sea shanties that Mr. Lucas is fond.
We have the sea shanties to do. We have a text message for Tadeus to reply to.
We have so much to do. It's just, this is my first week at my new job, and I'm on US time with all my stuff. Like, I'm working late into the evening, so we haven't had as much time. But the weekend...
Oh boy.
Weekend approaches. Should we also talk about what game we're going to play this weekend?
Yes, this coming weekend. We are almost certainly going to be beginning Stella, Stela, on the Switch for the Sunday gaming stream, which is weird interstellar alien archaeology and platforming, and looks really good fun. And if we can't quite work out how to do that, the reserve game I found today is called Bring Us the Moon, which is you are the last survivor of an accident on the space elevator above the moon, and you're basically told, go fix stuff. And it is basically Doom without the monsters, but with added survival fun in games. Yeah, I had a feeling you might know Tadeus.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think Tadeus will be getting voicemail over the weekend. That is our intention.
Peter Lucas holding an EDM rave in the lonely, and it's just him alone in a white room going, this is cracking. Great.
Yo, we have so many plans. We've literally started like a document for when we're allowed to travel again. It's next time by ocean, record these 8 things.
Yes.
Next time it's foggy, record these 7 things. Lockdown, man. We're just kind of making do with what we can. No, you do not need to get Peter Lucas some glow sticks, Zalia, because we don't get trick-or-treaters at our house anymore, and I've got plenty to spare.
Yep. The Jade.
They're so going to be like Stick Rave. And if I can get him anywhere near the ocean the next time there's a Fleet Week. Oh, y'all. Anyway, I think we should move on. Because we're here to talk about... Did you show off Chungus?
Oh,
you have not shown the boy?
See, the boy says hi. He's having the same kind of January everyone has. Like, really? This is a lot. I'm just going to wear a hat.
Poor Chungus. I don't blame Chungus. Sarah Gailey very brilliantly describes January as your brain is a glass ball.
Yes, and everything just flows off it.
Slides off and nothing sticks.
Rains, that is so sweet of you to say. In IRL, I'm really looking forward to seeing that. Yeah, January is the hangover morning of the year. Is that kind of...
Yeah.
Oh, God.
In fact, the iFox hat melody, yes. You can find all of Chungus's outfits, or at least all the ones I've taken decent photographs of, at Chungus's own bio page, because that's the way we roll. You didn't talk about your sourdough pancakes.
I made sourdough pancakes last weekend, and they were spectacularly good.
Why did you make sourdough pancakes?
Because a friend of ours gave me a new griddle as a Christmas present. I don't know why I'm doing this. I'm like, here's my hand, which does not have a cast iron griddle in it, but I'm gesturing as though it does. And I attempted to make Welsh cakes in it, and I basically incinerated them, because griddles get really hot really fast. And they were still delicious, because they're Welsh cakes. You know, the baseline level of victory there is put all of this stuff in a bowl.
I want more Welsh cakes. I want retail to be available again safely.
But yeah, we made a big old batch of sourdough pancake batter and just taught myself the correct levels in the griddle and made them and then ate all of them. It was great. Thank you very much, Hail to the Queen, for the subscription. Scott raises an interesting employment law question.
So is Chungus an employee of Escape Artist? Is he your coworker?
He's a consultant.
I don't know. I think he's more of a spiritual advisor than anything else.
He's a guru.
Consultant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He really does work in catering. Yeah.
Well, there is this... Okay. We'll talk about more about that later at the end of the stream. We have spooky stories to tell.
We do.
Does people want to hear spooky stories?
Content warning on this is basically Arnold Schwarzenegger saying the word all. Swearing, body horror, descriptions of corpses, death of children. This is the serious business. So if any of this, and I haven't said this for a little while because we haven't done horror for a little while, if any of this makes you uncomfortable or hits any buttons which do not entertain but rather make you want to run away, it's okay. Do so. The most important thing here is that you're entertained. And I am not someone who subscribes to the idea of being traumatized as being entertained. We won't take it personally, and we know you'll be back next week because you're amazing people, and we'll have something which isn't this for you. In fact, we'll tell you what we'll have for you next week in a little bit. But yeah, if you need to step out, please do. And if you don't, buckle up.
Also, as Jax has added, expect accents, though after long discussions and many experiments, we have decided Alistair will not be attempting American accents.
I feel like it's a hole in my skill base that I'd be excited to fill.
Hey.
Y'all. Anyway, let's begin. This is called the SARM2. Why? Why do people insist on bringing toddlers and little kids out here if they're not going to watch them constantly? I mean, I can't imagine the level of negligence that will lead to your fucking 2-year-old wandering off and falling down a goddamn ravine. Fun fact, when someone's skull is shattered, it rumbles when you move it. It's kind of like broken pottery sliding around. I'm sorry, I haven't been around much. Here are a few things I think you guys might like. I have a buddy down in Deschutes County who is a veteran PR. About 2 years ago, he was spending the summer in a fire tower, and it was an unusually dry summer, so obviously he's on high alert. Now, his particular fire tower overlooked this one particular area, and there is a link to a JPEG that we'll give you. One night around 6 or so, he was out the balcony and looking around the area through binoculars. About a mile out, he thought. He saw something moving. Someone was walking along the trail that skirted the base of the mountains. It's a guy. Appeared to be in his late 50s, full beard, heavy gut. He moved along at a slow but steady pace, and unfortunately for him, he was in a no-go area. So my friend reached for his radio to call in and request another PR to intercept him. But it wasn't on his hip where he usually kept it, so he lowered the binoculars to look around, found it, attempted to relocate the man. All standard issue stuff. He found the area the man had been in. The guy was gone. Now, my friend, not unreasonably, he is puzzled, and he's worried too. Had he fallen? Was he hurt? He scanned all around, but there was absolutely no trace of the guy. He lowered his binoculars, but as he did so, there was a flash of red. He raised them, and the entire field was full of a shifting red, and he could make literally no sense of what he was seeing. Of course, eventually he figured it out. And when he did, he looked up, and the man was no more than 100 yards away, still walking with that same slow pace. My friend went into what I would guess was a mild state of shock, because this situation, to be explicit, was impossible. He remembers freezing. He remembers being forced to watch the man come closer to the base of the tower. And he remembers that there was something wrong with his eyes. They were looking down, but so far down that only the very, very tips of the irises were visible. That's how close he got before he stopped. Just below the balcony, he craned his head up, but his eyes did not move. And he opened his mouth, but didn't say anything for a moment. And then his jaw moved up and down a bit. And he said, "I saw you." The man's irises started to roll up. Just as they were about to make eye contact, my friend managed to break his paralysis, and he just booked it into the cabin. He slammed the door shut, locked it, and the man was there so fast my friend said he couldn't even register it. He tapped on the glass, and my friend refused to look at him. He turned his back and waited for the thing to go away. My friend believes that turning your back on a demon or other unholy thing will force it to leave. And I guess in this instance, he was right, because the thing eventually left. My friend stayed out there for the rest of the summer, somehow. He locked the doors at night. It's probably some kind of really weird refraction from a lake, or a kind of mirage, but there's been a little cluster of sightings that I thought were interesting. They happened in the same place and at the same time, but on different days. Universally, the reports basically describe the observer hiking up to a scenic viewing spot and seeing something up above the horizon, higher up than a mirage would normally be, almost at eye level. When viewed with plain sight, it was impossible to tell what it was, but it was obviously stationary. When viewed with magnification, it was possible to make out someone suspended in the air, upside down, hands at his sides. There was a teenage kid that was part of one of these groups, and they compared it to those glitches where you can see through walls and the NPCs are just standing around in weird places in T-pose in video games. Like I said, we're pretty sure it's a weird mirage from a lake, or possibly even some stupid prank, but we're keeping an eye on it. Hey, do you ever have a memory you can't remember, but you can remember remembering it? Oh God, it's driving me crazy. There was a big case, down south, a few months ago. Uncle from a prominent local family went out hunting, did not come back. The theory was he'd fallen into a sinkhole, since they'd been popping up in the area with the unusually heavy rainfall we'd had. Even though the search was largely conducted with this in mind, though, it took a long time to find him, and it didn't help that by the time they did, his legs were gone. He was the victim of one of the absolute dumbest fucking accidents I have ever seen. oh boy. One of those things that'll happen once and never again. This poor guy tripped on an exposed root and fell forward. And when he reached out to catch himself, he had the unfortunate luck of breaking through into a sinkhole. It wasn't particularly deep, but unbeknownst to him, it had a second entrance at the base of a tree 50 yards away. Unfortunately, the sinkhole was occupied, and he landed awkwardly on his wrists into a pile of diamondbacks. The guy survived long enough to feel one puncture his eye and another, we think, bite through his lip, but not much longer than that. So stuck almost vertically, the venom basically mainlined straight to his brain, and he died before he could figure out a way to escape. It goes down, in my mind at least, as one of the most idiotic, senseless ways for someone to die that I have ever heard of. And now tea.
That's just nasty.
Yeah.
Bite to the eye.
Snaketality. Yes. This is SAR Mountains. Okay. All right. Now that I'm not confined anymore to a plot-driven box, I can go back to telling stories the way I like to, or I guess the way he likes to. Russell had an accident. It was pretty bad. I'm not sure when he's going to be back on here. He's got some bad motor problems now, and I guess the therapy takes a long time. He would prefer to tell you guys about the accident himself when he gets back. So I'm going to leave it at that. In the meantime, he wants me to talk to you guys a little about what I do and what kind of things I've seen. I guess he's got this project going about the stairs. I haven't read most of the posts. He told me what kind of things you guys are interested in, though, and I've spent some time thinking about it and coming up with a bunch. Russell said to make a large post, so I'll make this one a good length if I can. Edit. I can't figure out the bullet points. I'm really sorry. So it's just going to be a big paragraph. I'm KD, by the way. Hi. Okay, well, first off, I really want to thank Russell for mentioning tree wells and all sorts of other stuff. What I want people to take away from all of this, more than anything, is that you need to take this stuff really seriously. We're not kidding when we tell you to bring survival gear for even brief hikes or climbs, and if you're a free climber, well, this story is for you. 2 kids were out free climbing at a park I used to work at in Central Oregon. Of course... Oregon.
No, Oregon.
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 Thank you.
2 kids were out free climbing at a park I used to work at in Central Oregon. Of course, doing that... What?
I'm sorry. It's Oregon?
Oregon.
Correct.
Okay. 2 kids were free climbing... Sorry, give me a moment.
Yeah, because you said it like Oregon, and they're all like, oh god, that's...
Is that Central Oregon?
Central Oregon. Oh, right. Fine, you may call it Central Oregon. Let's move on.
2 kids were out free climbing at a park I used to work at in Central Oregon. Of course, doing that is completely forbidden, but they were in a pretty remote area of the park, and it was still pretty early in the spring for most climbers. The morning they were out, I remember there being a layer of ice on everything, but it was almost totally invisible. See, that just happens sometimes. It's the way the frost freezes, or if there's a little rain overnight. And I remember seeing this and thinking it was going to be a bad day. Anyway, these kids were scaling up a cliff face and they hit a spot that must have been in the shade. That layer of frost was probably still there. They fell from about the same height, which also leads me to think they literally couldn't grip onto the rock. Their fingernails were broken from dragging them as they fell. They were conscious the whole way down. They had time to think about how they were going to die. They had time to wonder if it would hurt. The first kid landed on his feet. How, I have no idea. And both tibia and fibula shattered. The force drove his femurs up through his body cavity and into his ribs, pushing his stomach up into his throat, tearing through everything else in its path. He didn't die right away. He dragged himself about 2 feet before collapsing. His friend landed on his upper back and neck, which drove his chin into his chest with enough force to shatter his jaw and sternum. Pieces of bone ripped through his heart, but if that hadn't killed him, the impact to the back of his head would have. The bleeding was catastrophic and caused his now bright red eyes to bulge out of his skull, and it were 15. I specialize in mountain rescues, and a lot of what I do is pick up bodies. If you get in trouble on a mountain and you're not equipped to handle it, you're going to die. We find so many skiers each year upside down in tree welts, and I wish to God I didn't know what that kind of position does to a face. You don't rot in that kind of cold, you mummify or stay frozen. Most of them are screaming or biting the snow when they die. A little girl I found last winter was sucking her thumb. Sometimes they pull their hair out if they're in there long enough. One woman ripped off her false nails and took the real ones along with them. Don't know what she was trying to do. Sometimes we find climbers at the bottom of whatever face they've fallen down. They look fine until you try to move them, and then the bones click around inside. That's if you get to them before the cold and rigor set in. Otherwise, they're like big ice cubes. They get cold enough sometimes that if you touch them, your skin sticks. And then we find the ones that don't belong. I started putting them in a group in my head that I call the accidental stops. I think of the bodies I find as passengers on rides, and it helps me piece together how they end up where they do. These ones, they get off the ride too soon, and they end up in strange places. There was one case where a guy with 3 kids disappeared, left them behind in the woods. Luckily, we found them before anything happened, but we didn't find the guy until the next day. Now, I was in an area of the park that has a lot of ravines, these tricky little rock falls in places. I was climbing up one of the ravines, and in this tiny little space in the rocks, something shines when I get close to it. I backed up, I got my light in there, and sure enough, he is smashed up in there somehow. This guy, this big guy, folded himself into a 3 by 2 foot space, managed to disintegrate just about every bone in himself in the process. It's amazing how far the neck can stretch when the spine isn't there. Skin is much more elastic than you'd think. Holding his body was like trying to hold on to a very, very slippery beanbag. There was just nothing solid there anymore. A lot of the time, though, it's the kids who are accidentals. Little boys especially. Maybe they're the ones who wander off the most. They're the ones we find 2 feet under the bottom of a moving stream, dressed in the clothes they disappear in, cause of death undetermined. Or we find them 10 feet from where the searches began, curled up in a fern with the top half of their head and their nose removed. And when I say removed, I mean the way those scientists who slice off tiny pieces of brain do it. Perfect. Clean. A boy I knew went missing 3 years ago. He was so sweet. He came up every year with his troop to go camping in the summer. I used to go up to their campsite on the last night of the trip and tell scary stories to them. It was a lot of fun, and he was always very polite, and he would roast marshmallows for me. When he disappeared, he was only 14. He was a really, really good kid. He was actually one of the rare ones that goes missing at night. It's much more common for them to go missing during the day because that's when most of them are up and wandering around. My guess is that he went to go to the bathroom, and while he was out there, he noticed them and decided to go and investigate. Now, officially, he wandered off and got lost. That's the park's way of saying we have no fucking idea where your child is. And no idea where to even begin looking, if we're being completely honest, which we never are. I took the news very hard. I really wanted to be part of the team, and I had to fight hard to be included. Normally they restrict rangers who have any kind of relation to the missing person from searching, but in this case they made an exception because the area is largely mountainous, and that's what I do. I looked for him for weeks, and I hadn't found a single sign that he'd ever stepped out of the camp. Eventually, I came back to the site and started over. I combed every inch. If I hadn't done that, I'd never have found him. He was very small by that point, you see. Just a soccer ball-sized ball of his torso left. Almost perfectly round. It included the curve of a lower rib and a tiny segment of his spine. The spinal cord itself was gone. I found it under a pile of dead pine needles. It was taken to the ME and tested and confirmed. I don't know what they told the parents, but it doesn't really matter. The casket was sealed before they even got there, and it would have been so very, very cruel to let them see the contents. Like Russell, I have a lot of friends in the service. The stress gets to you, and it's nice to have people who you can talk to about it. Every year, I try to meet up with my core group, Russell and 2 others, and we go out and camp in our secret spots during the fall. One year, we invited a couple others, 6 of us all in all, and actually rented a cabin out in the Smoky Mountains. It was one of the best years in memory. I don't think there was a single day that we spent more than a few hours sober, usually just enough to get into town and pick up food for me. I have to eat a lot because of a condition that popped up suddenly when I was a kid. We stayed for a week, and on the last night we were all a little low. I think we were all feeling the end of vacation blues. Pretty strong, in fact. Suddenly Mike, one of the non-regulars, pops his head up from his phone and looks out the window. "What's up?" I asked him. "I don't know. Something moved." "Go kill it, I'm hungry," I joked. He laughed and we forgot about it until I got up to get a small beer. The cabin didn't have electricity, which is actually why we chose it, so the only light was the fire on the other side of the room. The interior was dark, and it's easy to see out or in at night, and I'm on my way to the cooler in the kitchen when I notice someone on the edge of the property making their way towards the cabin. They are dragging themselves along the ground, and I can see that something is really very wrong with their legs. I stand about 2 feet back from the window and watch while the others kept talking, completely unaware. The first thing I noticed was that he had no full clothing. The temperatures can drop very quickly during this season. Anyone out here is going to need at least a coat and hat, and that's if they plan to camp out. This guy, cargo shorts, tank top. There's no major roads anywhere near here, and the closest cabin is 5 miles away, so I know he hasn't had an accident and come for help. There's enough light coming from the windows that I can see he is very tan. He's dragging himself onto the property with his elbows. His hands are held up, and I can see that the fingers are all broken. They're bent and twisted, and when he shuffles forwards, they stay rigid. I know, of course, that I need to go and help this man, but I can't bring myself to do it. Too many things don't add up. I can't figure out where he would have come from, and as he gets closer, I can see there's no dirt on his clothes. And there's something wrong with those too, and I can't tell what it is until he comes forward into the square of light under the window, and that's when I see it. There's no seams. There's no collar. There's no hemline. The fabric blends into his skin. The fabric seems to grow out of him, and when he moves, it doesn't bunch up or wrinkle. It's like his clothing is a part of him. Now he's right below the windows now, and I can see that he's making this anguished face as if he's in pain and knows that I'm right there watching. He drags himself so close to the house that all I can see are his legs, and that's when I notice his legs, and the fact that they're stretched behind him in this long, long line. all the way back to the tree line he has come from. Where the ankle should be, there's another calf, then another knee, and so on all the way back at least 15 feet. Who the fuck knows how much further beyond that? Now, there's movement at my eye level, so I flinch backwards, and he is staring inside at me, and his face reminds me of the mask of tragedy. His mouth is wrenched down so far at the corners. His neck is stretched out. His head hangs from it upside down, like some kind of ripe fruit, and he looks at me from this bizarre position, with his head hanging off the side of his neck, his mouth wrenched open like that, and that's when I drop the bottles and I go to get the rifle out of the mudroom. Everyone reacts and I ignore them, snugging the gun against my shoulder, but by the time I get back and get a good shot, he's gone. I decided to tell them I'd seen a big coyote. Not because I didn't think they'd believe me, but because I didn't want such a good visit to have to end that way. I have to leave this here for now, but since there's no time limit on posts here, I'll probably just update sporadically as I have time. I'll do my best to not let that be too infrequent. What do we think? Time for one more or not?
You gonna say hi to the raid?
Hello to the raid.
Everybody's very impressed that you didn't break stride as we were descended upon by the soup goblins.
Oh, it's always good to see the soup goblins. How's everyone doing? Hope everyone's doing okay.
So, yes, everybody, apologies for spamming them, but Search and Rescue has really rather serious content warnings. So, please do step away if this is not what you need. Don't worry, we will be giving you something lighthearted and fun to end the evening with, so you will not be going to bed directly after hearing all the scary stories. But if any of these content warnings for body horror, descriptions of corpses and mutilation, or the death of children bother you, this is an excellent time to step away.
We've got one of the three left. One is really short, so let's do that.
All right, so let's do one more, and then we're going to take a little break, and then we have a heck of a shenanigan for you.
The Nameless Dark, story number 2. This is the only one marked as Search and Rescue. Landslides are common here in the early spring, and that means extra policing of the trails and backwoods areas where we know people go. Most of the time we'll send out a few helicopters, but about 3 years ago we went massively over budget after a fire in the main lodge, and we couldn't afford to bring them out. This meant we had to go in by foot. KD and I teamed up and headed out to the southwest, which is mostly mountainous, a couple of small rivers. Essentially, we got paid to go out and camp for a week. It was great. If we found a landslide, excellent. If not, excellent. Either way, we come out on top. Now, we're both fast in the woods, and we made great time. Our designated quadrant was about 15 miles from the trailhead, relatively close, but not frequently used due to the steep incline. Both of us are familiar with the area, and we were in good spirits. We camped out about a mile from our target to eat dinner and turn in early. This was back when I still slept relatively well, so I fell asleep with no real issue. Katie said it took her about 5 minutes to wake me up. She was crouched over my bag with her hair in all directions and her eyes slightly unfocused. "Stop," I said, pushing her hands away. "Stop, get off me." She blinked and frowned. "Something's yelling," she mumbled. "You got the blinker?" I didn't understand what she wanted, so I tried to tell her she was sleepwalking, but she insisted on the blinker. She made a sweeping motion with her hand. "Flashlight? Dog? What?" I asked. I pointed at the bag by the fire pit. She dug through it. "What? What is it?" "I don't know," she said. She pushed her bag to the side and turned the light on the ground. "Has something got in there?" She shook her head. "I don't know. It was weird." "Well, what do you want to do?" She got the flashlight trained on the ground. "I don't know." "Oh, Jesus." "Go to sleep," I said. She blinked a few times, dragged her bag back. She kept the flashlight on, but I was tired, and I shut my eyes, and I'm not sure if I fell asleep or not, but Katie was shaking me again, and this time she was awake. "What?" "Listen," she said. From somewhere close by, we heard a very strange sound. I heard it in the very back of my ear, and if I even breathed too loudly, I drowned it out. I cocked my head to try and figure out where it was coming from, but it was coming from all directions. A kind of distant, intermittent tone that I wasn't able to identify. "What the fuck's that?" I said. "No idea," she whispered, looking over her shoulder, "but I've been hearing it for an hour, and it's not going away, and it's not coming closer." "What do you think?" I asked. "I have no idea." We sat on my bag and listened to the sound. I got up and walked in a wide circle around the camp. It was almost impossible to tell, but I began to suspect that the sound was getting louder when I passed by the north end. Katie got up and grabbed the light, and I took my rifle off my pack. The sky was clear, so there was a good amount of light, and from all around us we could hear deer. Now, 9 times out of 10, the mysterious rustling visitors you get here at night are deer. Every so often, the beam of the flashlight passed over a set of eyes, low to the ground, and I cut them a wide berth. The females aren't generally aggressive, but the males are assholes, especially in the early spring. We'd gone maybe a quarter of a mile, and the sound was definitely getting louder. We started to call out, and the sound seemed to respond. We started to jog, and the beam of her flashlight bounced off the trunks of the trees. We jogged faster. The sound got louder. It was a man's voice, and it was coming from somewhere above us. We called out, identified ourselves as rangers, but the voice stayed constant, a wordless, muffled wailing. The sound got a little louder, and Katie made a hard right, slowing down fast enough that I almost ran into her. The sound was right there, right in front of us, but I couldn't see anything. I dropped down and felt along the ground, put my ear to it, but it just wasn't there. I spun in a circle, calling out, and then Katie grabbed my arm. "Russ?" she said. What is that?" She was pointing at something on a large boulder, about 10 feet from us. The flashlight bleed whitewashed the surface, and I adjusted the beam. Something on the boulder was moving slightly. Something small and pale. It wiggled as I walked forward, and the sound continued to get louder. Whatever this was, it was firmly embedded in the rock. Nothing about it was familiar, and I was curious. I picked up a stick and poked it, very gently. It responded but didn't move away. I leaned forward slowly and carefully, my hands near my face in case the thing had some kind of spray defense. Something on the back of the pale thing caught the light for a brief moment. Something came together, and I moved away very slowly. Katie watched me with wide eyes, and I stood in front of her, squinting into the light. What is it?" she asked. I turned and looked at it. "Russ?" I led her over and helped her get a closer look. She reacted to the sound, flinched away when she saw the back of the thing. She fell on her butt and scooted away, her eyes wide. "We have to get it open," I said. "We need to." We looked at the boulder where the sound was still coming from, and where the tip of the man's finger wiggled. We searched the surface, took rocks, rang them against the sides. The screaming got louder. We yelled at each other and pounded on the boulder, and neither of us would leave to get help, and the man screamed and screamed and screamed from inside it, and I kept turning to the rifle, even though I knew it wouldn't help, and I pounded the surface with my fists, and I thought about cubic inches and how much the man was screaming. And I told him to conserve his air, and all he would do was scream. And when we realized there was nothing we could do, we sat with him until the next afternoon, when the screaming finally stopped and the finger was still. We packed up camp and kept going to the target area. We spent days searching the land. On our way out, we passed by the boulder, and the finger was gone. The rock around it clawed and chipped. I haven't really thought about it much ever since. Let's take a short break. Welcome back, everybody. Hope we're all happily planning our future camping holidays. Just before things go really, really horrible, we're going to step off the beaten path, but not in the way that gets people killed, and instead go full. I'm going to press the button.
No, I got it. There you go.
Shenanigans. La 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 shenanigans.
Go ahead and remind everybody in the chat what shenanigans are.
Welcome to Brain Sorbet. This is a part of the show which we develop precisely because we tend to do horror stories, and because despite having hosted a horror podcast for over a decade at this point, I'm really easily scared, and I don't really like this stuff being the last thing in my brain. So this is where we we kind of read through comedy bits of fan fiction or Magnus-related stuff, which the relentlessly talented fan base have produced.
We have two pieces for you
We
tonight.
do. The first of which is from the fantastic Eldritch Possum Cat, pardon me.
Which relates to the fan art from tonight.
And which relates directly to the fan art from the top of the show. I'm just looking up a title, and it's just crossword fic.
Yeah.
Back at the bed and breakfast, Elias sat on the bed, watching some horrible reality program on the telly, while Peter did a crossword. Love, what's 7 down? Peter asked. Elias shook his head. You want me to use my beholding powers, so you don't have to figure out crossword clues? Yes. Elias threw a pillow at him. Peter dodged it. Maybe you can't. Maybe finding out someone's horrible trauma is easy, but the beholding doesn't do crossword clues. It's okay to admit it, Elias. Peter, you ass, Elias muttered, then stared into space for a moment, seemingly concentrating. Fine, it's equestrian. There, see? Oh, thank you. 4 across? Peter asked. Elias threw the other pillow at him. I love that. That's really good.
That's lots of fun. And now for the main shenanigan. Hello. That's right. I'm going to try and run the buttons and read at the same time. So, for our main shenanigan tonight, and I do mean main because this thing is almost 5,000 words long, which roughly translates as 30 minutes. So please do make sure you're comfortable. You're going to enjoy the heck out of this one.
Before we dive in,
Okay, go ahead.
I've just remembered. An
What?
alarm is about to go off.
An alarm is about to go off? Oh, gosh, yes. But your phone is in the bedroom and behind the door, so it'll just go off forever.
Let me go.
Unanswered.
I'm going to be super responsible.
Okay, fine. Alistair's gonna go turn off the alarm on his phone to remind him that he has to take a medication. And if you haven't taken a medication, or fed a pet, or had a water, or done a food, stream mom, please make sure you go and do that. And then if you want to, you can load up the fanfic that we are gonna read tonight and read alongside with us. Yes, very good. I'm just gonna, yes, stream mom. I'm not wearing my shirt. I'm not wearing my stream mom shirt, but I'm vamping until Alistair gets back. Can you tell? You're gonna see him walk behind me any minute now. Any minute now. Ah, I did it too early. Okay, that's fine. Stream mom, please ask Alistair to check in from behind the bedroom door. Honey? Yeah. Is everything okay? No lumberjack cat boys. No lumberjack. A big echo from both of you. Oh no, that's not good. That's probably because Alistair left his microphone on when he walked away. So let me see if there's anything we can do about it. Is that a little bit better? You doing okay?
I'm doing fine.
Alrighty. Is that a little bit better, folks? Or are we going back to having that echo problem?
I am successfully returned, and what a lovely spider, Beastrogen.
I'm going to give it a few moments because now I've got both of the microphones on, and I'm hoping that we're not still having that echo effect. If we are, let me know, chat.
Compost is reporting echo is gone. Foggage Green is reporting not perfect but much better.
Let's see. There's still a bit of echo, but less. Hold on as I turn down the gain on my particular microphone and see if that's a little bit better. I literally cobbled together this two mic, two camera setup in the 45 minutes before the stream started. So, yeah.
What she's underselling is that she did it in the 45 minutes she had free today.
Yeah, it happens. Right.
know.
So here's the shenanigan, and we are going to go ahead and kick off.
All right.
This is Decree Nisi by Shiny Opals. I'm going to read the notes after the story, okay? Judge Roberta Field eyed the next case on the docket balefully. She'd known it was coming. As soon as she'd seen it appear in her schedule, she'd cursed and debated breaking a leg, since it had been too late to have another baby as a way out. She'd convinced herself that was too extreme, however, and lulled herself into a false sense of security that she must be misremembering, and it wouldn't be that bad. So she decided to keep working and let it happen. And now it was here. The Bouchard-Lucas divorce. Again. It had been 3 years since the last one, which had to be a new record. She schooled her face to a neutral expression as she entered the court. As she situated herself, she swept her gaze over the room, taking in the unfortunately familiar faces. Captain Peter Lucas let me try that again. Welcome to live recording. This is how I flub. Captain Peter Lucas looked the same as he always did. Great woolen peacoat and an affable expression that somehow made her shiver with the cold. He brought with him one singular battered notebook that she knew contained the details of his family's entire financial empire. Elias Bouchard, meanwhile, technically the less wealthy of the two, was in another of his exorbitant suits, this one dark purple, and was extracting from a perfect leather briefcase that, of course, matched his shoes, enough crisp documentation that anyone think they'd been married for hundreds of years. This time, however, Bouchard had escorts. Her first hope on taking in the extra figures present in court had been that one of them had finally decided to use some of their ample wealth to actually hire a solicitor, instead of representing themselves and allowing their divorce proceedings to descend into what was either a furious personal battle or, more horrifyingly, extended foreplay. However, it took only a second for that mistaken assumption to be corrected once she took in the uniform of Bouchard's escorts and realized they were correction officers. "Mr. Bouchard?" she asked, raising an eyebrow.
Your Honor,
he said smoothly. She wasn't sure how a smile could be slimy, but Elias Bouchard managed it every time.
I'm currently residing at Her Majesty's pleasure. I've been granted some leave to see to my personal affairs.
Right, said Roberta. She realized she had a headache, which was a new personal best, even for a Bouchard-Lucas divorce. She reached into her handbag, extracted some paracetamol, and washed it down with her coffee. Proceedings began, as they always did in Bouchard-Lucas divorces, with failing to agree on the grounds. Which one of you has actually petitioned for divorce?
I have. Go. Sorry.
They both said in unison. They glared at each other. Roberta stared down at them both, then looked through the paperwork on her desk and, with a heavy sigh, realized she did in fact have two petitions. The one from Elias Bouchard cited desertion by Lucas. The one from Lucas cited unreasonable behavior by Bouchard. "Mr. Bouchard," she said, "perhaps you can summarize, briefly, your case for desertion."
Certainly.
Just leave the speech mark out.
Since we married 3 years ago, I have seen Peter twice, each for less than 2 hours.
Since you married, Roberta frowned. She couldn't help herself. Didn't you divorce 3 years ago?
Is that relevant?
No, I suppose not. Roberta shook herself and tried to remind herself that getting involved in their bullshit was a surefire way to make this worse. She turned to Lucas. Captain Lucas, do you wish to dispute that statement?
No. Why would I? It's perfectly true.
Right. She pinched her nose. Great. Perhaps you could summarize your case for unreasonable behavior.
Elias,
said Lucas, glowering darkly over at his soon-to-be ex-husband,
expects me to spend time with him.
Great, she said again, more brightly than she felt. So, to recap, you both agree you've not lived together for the duration of your marriage, which is 3 years, and you both agree that you wish to dissolve your marriage. Am I correct? Both men nodded. So the quickest and simplest thing to do would be to update your paperwork on the basis that you've been separated for 2 years or more, and you consent to the divorce, and then both men began to talk at once.
This is unreasonable behavior from Elias. This is desertion, and I will not...
Order in court! Demanded Roberta. We're going to take a short break. I strongly advise you both to consider the simplest way through this. Then she swept out, went back to her chambers, bashed her head against the desk, and wondered if it would be too late to run away and join the circus. It took 4 hours and 6 more recesses to establish grounds for divorce. This included a detour into whether or not either of them could plausibly have committed adultery. Bouchard insisting he had better things to do than...
sordid little affairs.
With one breath, and then expressing his doubts as to whether Lucas had ever spoken to another man with the next. Lucas had then insisted he didn't need to speak to someone to commit adultery with them, which, given how he approached marriage, Roberta assumed was probably true. But that if anyone in this relationship had done so, it was Bouchard. Someone called Simon Fairchild was brought up by both parties. After that detour, they attempted to dissolve their marriage based on bigamy, on the basis that Peter Lucas was married to the sea, and Elias Bouchard was married to his job, at least before he'd been sent to prison. For whatever reason, the fact that he was in prison did not appear to be a factor in the divorce proceedings. Roberta had had to call them to order a few times, but for the most part they remained impeccably English about everything, which was to say they were both exceedingly polite, while also dripping with contempt for her, each other, the institute of marriage, and the idea of affection in general. At last, however, they agreed to her original suggestion of separation after 2 years with consent. This only happened when she started implying she might have to deny the divorce altogether. Not that she could. In any other divorce proceeding, she would be able to. However, the last time she'd tried to do anything substantive about the farce that was a Bouchard-Lucas divorce, she'd arrived at work the next day to an email from the mayor's office about a donation from the Lucas family to the city and a request to keep things running smoothly. However, she could have put a bit of delay on things, and both Bouchard and Lucas seemed to realize it. Or perhaps she was merely telling herself that to convince herself she had a semblance of control over what was happening to her. Perhaps they were merely bored of this particular aspect of divorcing and wanted to move on. Move on, that was, to the distribution of their finances and properties.
I believe I am entitled to a 10% stake in Solus Shipping,
opened Bouchard,
and the vessel known as the Tundra. I object most strenuously,
Lucas added.
And I believe that I am entitled to the Bouchard townhouse and the bones of Barnabas Bennett.
Roberta stared at them both. What the fuck?
I beg your pardon, Your Honor.
Roberta sighed and gritted her teeth. She pinched her nose and screwed shut her eyes and drew in a deep breath. My apologies, Mr. Bouchard, Captain Lucas, she said at last. She couldn't believe she'd first become a barrister, then a judge for this She was going to retire to a beach in the Caribbean, and she was not going to take Lucas's boat. And it would be Lucas's boat by the end of this. That much she knew. They never approached dividing their property by asking for what they actually wanted, after all. Sighing again, she glanced at the clock and wondered if calling another recess just so she could go scream into her office was acceptable. Forcing her face to be neutral, she turned back to the divorcing parties. Bouchard was smiling. Lucas was staring longingly at the window, although she didn't know why, since a thick fog had come over since that morning. Very well. Perhaps we can reach some sort of compromise.
If Peter weren't so unreasonable. If Elias wasn't out for only one thing.
Order in court, she interrupted before they could get started again. Let's discuss Solus shipping first. I'm going to take a sip of tea. It's my turn to take a sip of tea. I can't see the chat, so. Are people having fun?
Oh, they are.
Excellent.
Haggis is in. Haggis and Dragons.
Hey, Haggis Dragons, how you doing? Distribution of the major assets were eventually settled along exactly the same lines as every previous Bouchard-Elias divorce. Roberta even one recess had her assistant dig out the paperwork from their last one. Once she had it at her desk, she could read along and predict how things would end up. At one point, she made this mistake of making a suggestion that Elias Bouchard would get 2% of the shares in one of Peter Lucas's corporations, exactly has been agreed 3 years previously, and both men furiously argued for another 2 hours about why that was unacceptable, before agreeing to precisely those terms. She stopped making suggestions at that point. Finally, by day 4, it looked like all of their assets had been agreed with absolutely zero input from her.
Getting report of Echo. Sorry to cut across.
Okay. I'm not sure if I can... I'm not sure what else I can do from here.
Push comes to shove. Do you want to switch off one mic and...
Yeah, if we have to. Is it... Hang on a second. Let me take a look at the chat. Is it so bad that people aren't able to fall... It started when you picked up the tea. Interesting.
Why don't I just turn my mic off?
Okay.
Or down, because I barely need to be speaking, surely. No, because I've got dialogue. Being stupid.
Yeah. It's still easy to follow. Okay.
Okay.
We'll keep going. I'm going to move this over here. I'm going to be a little more in profile. Apologies. But that way I can keep an eye on the chat. Finally, by day 4, it looked like all of their assets had been agreed with absolutely zero input from her. She didn't know why they didn't just do this outside of the court system, unless they'd been put on this earth solely to torment her, her clerk, the ushers, and the 2 prison officers escorting Bouchard, who had fallen asleep several times over the course of the proceedings. I believe we have everything covered, she said at last. So if we can just...
There is one more thing, Your Honor.
Interrupted Bouchard. Yes, Mr. Bouchard, she said, staring him down. Unfortunately, she blinked first. She always blinked first with Bouchard.
Peter has stolen a treasured, sentimental piece from me while I have been incarcerated. I want it declared mine as part of the divorce agreement.
Yes, Yes, Mr. Bouchard, she asked. She glanced over at Lucas. He looked particularly smug as he took a drink from his cup of tea. She gritted her teeth.
It's that mug,
said Bouchard, pointing at the mug from which Lucas was drinking. Roberta stared. It was a plain, white mug, entirely unremarkable, except for the fact that it had the words, "World's Worst Boss," written on it.
It was a gift from a dearly departed employee of mine. I left it on my desk when I was arrested. I did not anticipate my supposed husband making off with it. Perhaps,
said Lucas, genially,
you should explain to Her Honor exactly why your employee was dearly departed and what that had to do with your arrest. I don't think the fact that I murdered an employee makes the case that you should own a world's worst boss mug quite as well as you think it does, Peter.
I'm sorry, you what? Said Roberta. Bouchard regarded her with a bored look.
This isn't a criminal court, and I am serving my sentence. I do hope you will keep the judgmental tone to yourself, Your Honor. However, I think I can comfortably ask you to rule that the mug is mine.
I suppose that's within my remit? She said at last, strangled. She glanced at the clerk, who shrugged helplessly.
Your Honor, what Elias is undoubtedly a terrible boss. If I might call upon a witness to prove that, I am in fact far more deserving of this mug than him. I, too, have a witness,
said Bouchard. Right, said Roberta. Yes, fine. Neither witness looked like they wanted to be there. Roberta supposed this was ultimately in line with the world's worst boss claim. Bouchard's witness was a mass of scars, for which she really hoped Bouchard was not about to claim responsibility. His graying hair and obvious exhaustion initially made her place him as coming up on middle age, but he had huge, mournful eyes that reminded her of a puppy in an RSPCA advert or that cat in the Shrek movies, and instantly shaved 10 years off that estimate. He directed his big, sad eyes solely at Lucas's witness, to the extent that he nearly tripped over a chair as he walked forward. Lucas's witness was deliberately avoiding the puppy eyes. Roberta had worked in family court long enough to recognize the signs. He, too, exuded exhaustion, but in a quiet, vanishing way. He was almost entirely colorless. Her eyes wanted to skip over him, and might have done so altogether if Bouchard's witness hadn't kept staring at him, making him almost the focal point of the room. Under that onslaught, however, he still held himself like a man who wanted to be small. Pity made her swear in Bouchard's witness first, to distract him from Lucas's witness. He chose a secular statement with something of a muttered comment about a god not of his choosing, directed at Bouchard, who merely looked amused. When she asked him to give his name, occupation, and address, he fixed his eyes on her for the first time, and the world momentarily shifted on its axis, the courtroom spinning around her ears. She gasped for breath, gripped the desk, and the pressure vanished. The witness now had his head dropped, inspecting the table.
Jonathan Sims, the archivist, the Magnus Institute, London,
he said. His voice carried throughout the entire courtroom, despite the low volume. Peter Lucas's witness stared straight ahead, expression unwavering.
Your Honor, if I may cross-examine my witness?
I think not, said Roberta. Bouchard raised one perfectly plucked eyebrow. Your supposition is that you are in fact the world's worst boss, and thus deserving of the mug proclaiming you to be so, correct? He inclined his head. This is a claim you've backed up by confessing to murdering one of your employees, a crime for which you are currently in prison.
A fact which I believe only furthers my case, Your Honor.
Be that as it may, it would be remiss of me to permit you to cross-examine another employee of yours under those circumstances. I will question the witnesses myself. If you have any questions you believe should be put to either of them that I have not, you may write them down and approach me at the end. Jonathan Sims glanced at her out of the corner of his eyes with something like surprise. This time the world did not shift. Mr. Sims, do you have any particular objection to that plan?
Other than that Elias is out of prison and has invited me to his divorce proceedings?
Asked Sims. She raised an eyebrow. Not that he was wrong, but this was still her courtroom after all. He sunk into his chair ever so slightly.
No, Your Honor.
Very well. Perhaps you can tell me which of Mr. Bouchard and Captain Lucas is a worse boss?
Easily, Your Honor, said Jonathan Sims without...
It's okay. Sorry. Without hesitation.
Peter Lucas. That is... I object most strenuously.
Bouchard began as Peter Lucas started to laugh. Roberta groaned, Bouchard, for God's sake, hire a solicitor to pre-screen your witnesses. Mr. Sims, if I keep questioning you on behalf of Mr. Bouchard, have you anything that will contribute towards his case? Sims considered this.
I can confirm that he did, in fact, murder my predecessor.
He offered.
And then he murdered someone else and framed me for it. Nearly allowed me to be killed by the police. And then he allowed me to be kidnapped by a mannequin for a month. And then he sent me to my death. And 2 other people, well, one died and one disappeared that day.
He paused.
I got better.
Thank you for clarifying on that point, Roberta said dryly. Sim's lip twitched, and he gave a minute shrug. Just for my records, Mr. Sims, you say all of that, and you still list Captain Lucas as the worst boss?
Yes.
Because? Sim's eyes returned to Lucas's witness for far too long for it to be a coincidence.
Personal reasons,
he said at last.
Oh, for God's sake, John,
hissed Bouchard.
You're even further behind in your powers than I thought, if you think that's the worst of it.
Sim's eyes narrowed at Bouchard. I think we can move on to the next witness, unless there are any additional questions from Captain Lucas.
None whatsoever.
As Sim stood to leave the witness box, however, she could swear she suddenly felt a strange, crackling tingle in the back of her skull, a buzz of static that made her headache worse. Lucas's witness was one Martin Blackwood, assistant to Peter Lucas, who unfortunately also gave his address as the Magnus Institute. Roberta was starting to wonder if someone ought to slip these two some leaflets about their employment rights or perhaps the benefits of unionizing. Mr. Blackwood, she began at last, and Martin Blackwood's eyes on her were politely distant, barely there at all. Jonathan Sims at the back of the room, looking at Martin Blackwood, was a far more noticeable presence. Perhaps you can tell me who was the quote-unquote world's worst boss for you. He was going to say Bouchard. She knew it in her bones. It would be so very like a Bouchard-Lucas divorce for them to bring witnesses for each other. Nobody divorced quite like Elias Bouchard and Peter Lucas, after all.
Oh, of course, Your Honour. His name's Fred Hazelton, and he was a supervisor when I had a Saturday job at Tesco's for a couple of months.
There was silence. Then Jonathan Sims began to laugh.
Martin!
Lucas sounded extremely offended.
Really, Martin?
Bouchard demanded.
Look, you've clearly never worked a retail job in your lives. I mean, Elias has only made me cry once. Peter's never even got that far. Cried a few times over John, I suppose.
Sims abruptly stopped laughing at that.
But Fred was the actual worst, all right? Screaming matches, shifts all over the place, never got paid on time. Harassment, outing me, bothering the others, throwing things at people. Your lot are amateurs, honestly. Flexible hours, bank holidays off, office of my own with an actual chair to sit on. There's even a dental plan. I mean, sure, fear for my life, but I had that moving pallets of baked beans without any health and safety training. And I was on minimum wage.
Bouchard and Lucas were staring at him with the utmost horror. Blackwood snorted at them, then turned to Roberta and gave her a brittle smile.
Is there anything else I can help you with, Your Honour?
Roberta briefly pulled her hand over her eyes as she smiled. No, Mr. Blackwood. Thank you for your time. As Martin Blackwood got up and grabbed his coat, Peter Lucas started speaking.
I think, Your Honour, since one of our two witnesses clearly identified myself as the worst of the two, then...
At this point, Martin Blackwood was passing down between the two tables, Bouchard on one side, Lucas on the other. His hand shot out, and he pushed, and Roberta watched almost in slow motion as the world's worst boss mug flew off the table and arced down and down and down until it hit the ground, where it shattered into 1,000 pieces. The last dregs of Lucas's tea puddled on the floor.
Whoops,
said Martin Blackwood flatly. Roberta could have kissed him. So, from the looks of it, could Jonathan Sims.
Martin!
Lucas jumped straight up.
That was not your mug. I hope you understand that'll be coming out of your salary. I'll make a note to tell payroll this month,
said Martin Blackwood in the same flat, uninterested tone. I think, since the distribution of all major assets has now been agreed, we should adjourn until tomorrow. We can have this all written up and signed. Bouchard glanced at his watch.
Oh, I quite agree, Your Honour. We've got reservations, after all.
She blinked at him. Bouchard turned to Lucas.
Are you coming?
He demanded.
I can make my own way there,
said Lucas sulkily.
I won't have you be late to our first date, Peter,
snapped Bouchard. Lucas sighed, a deep put upon sigh, then got to his feet. Roberta gaped after them as they left together. Then she turned to the two prison officers who were now hurriedly following them out the door. Isn't he meant to be going back to prison for murder? Was what she was trying to articulate. She liked to think the message was clear enough. No comment, said one of the officers.
For fuck's sake,
said Jonathan Sims. Roberta decided to let that one go. Then the courtroom was now empty of everyone, except the courtroom staff and Jonathan Sims, who was moving towards the door and... No, wait. There was still someone else?
Martin, please, can we talk?
Roberta blinked and shook her head. Martin Blackwood was there at the door with Jonathan Sims. Of course he was there. He had never left. Why had she... No matter. Blackwood was now looking at Sims, his shoulders hunched over slightly, clearly wanting to be anywhere but here. She glanced at the ushers. She wasn't quite sure what was happening between these two, but unwanted attention was unwanted attention. She thought she'd better keep half an eye in case she needed to call security, so she busied herself, moving her papers around.
What, John?
Blackwood just sounded tired.
I can't. You know I can't. Martin, it's just two things. Please, I really need to only you're here. I need to talk to you while you're here.
He somehow widened his eyes, which furthered the impression that he was one voiceover short of a charity appeal for money. Martin Blackwood sighed.
Two things, then,
he agreed. Sims nodded rather urgently.
Two things. Firstly, let's get married. What?
Yelped Blackwood. Roberta nearly fell... I'm going to say that again. Roberta nearly fell off her chair. This was only the second time she'd ever had a marriage proposal in her courtroom. The first had been, of course, Lucas and Bouchard immediately after their fourth divorce. She'd fined them both for contempt. She doubted they'd ever paid.
We can't. What? What?
Martin Blackwood stuttered.
Why can't we? Because they're lonely. Peter.
By this point, Blackwood was frantically waving one hand vaguely towards the door, his voice rising in pitch at every word.
We just attended his divorce. From Elias. Lonely avatars can apparently marry eye avatars.
He reached up and scratched the back of his neck self-consciously.
It was just an idea.
Martin Blackwood gaped at him wordlessly, mouth opening and shutting like a fish. Jonathan Sims stood in the silence, and after a painfully long pause, gave an apologetic shrug.
John, what the fuck?
Said Blackwood at last.
Sorry, buy me dinner first.
Sims Stepped all over that one. Sims stopped talking, his mouth a perfect circle of intense surprise. Then it split into a grin that immediately made him look another 10 years younger.
Really?
He said, and his voice had gone stupidly giddy. Roberta rolled her eyes, although without much rancor, as she began to pack her papers away properly. On the one hand, it would be nice if something good came of a Bouchard-Lucas divorce other than her clerk's overtime pay. On the other, it was increasingly sounding like they were in a cult of some sort, and Sims had just compared the two of them to Bouchard and Lucas. Neither of these facts boded particularly well for their future. If she found herself divorcing them because they got married in a rush, well, just as long as neither of them owned a sodding boat, she supposed.
You said two things?
Blackwood asked, before she could get on with reminding them to leave her courtroom and go and either get married or do something eminently more sensible.
Yes. We should probably talk to, the others for this. When Elias said that thing about me not knowing the worst of what he's up to, I couldn't help but, I actually wanted to know what he was thinking. And he was right there. So I think I know what he's planning, and it turns out he might be the world's worst boss after all.
Martin Blackwood stared at Jonathan Sims.
And you didn't think to lead with that?
He demanded.
The other thing seemed more important. John.
It was funny how much more color he had now. Gentlemen, Roberta interrupted, and they both jumped and turned abruptly to face her, looking for all the world like they'd forgotten she was there. The court will be closing for the day soon. Perhaps you should continue this elsewhere.
Yes, of course, Your Honor.
Sims stuttered. His gaze on her was extremely brief before his puppy eyes were back on Blackwood. I don't know if I should say congratulations or not, she added dryly, at which Blackwood's cheeks further darkened and Sims shuffled on his feet. But I suppose under the circumstances, the best I can wish is that we never have cause to meet again, at least professionally. And please, for the love of God, find another job. Sims' almost grin was a little wry.
We're doing the best we can.
Blackwood shrugged.
Could be worse. Could be retail. Honestly, Martin,
said Sims.
Honestly, John, said
Blackwood in a clear mimicry of Sims' accent. Then he reached over Jonathan Sims' head and pushed open the door.
Right, let's go find Basira and Co. Then, you owe me dinner.
He went pinker than before. Jonathan Sims beamed at him. Roberta shook her head and shoved her final files into her briefcase, and when she looked up again, they were gone. Outside the windows of the court, the sun was shining, almost like that week's fog had never been there at all, and she smiled to herself. One more Lucas Bouchard divorce practically done. Probably only another 8, I'm stepping all over this. Probably only another 8 or more so to go before one of them died. It was, all things considered, a good day. Revenge of the Echo. I'm starting to wonder what happened there.
Aren't those great? Aren't those two fantastic?
All right,
bits of
so
thing?
let me read the notes. There's a set of notes at the top, and then there's a set of notes at the bottom. Here we go. Note, my eternal thanks to Silver Color for the quick beta on this. Fun fic relevant fact. In the UK, there's no such thing as no-fault divorce, meaning that if you want a divorce, you need to supply adequate grounds for doing so, and there are 5 acceptable ones. Judges can, and sometimes do, reject these grounds for not being suitable. Is this archaic and terrible? Welcome to the UK, and the reason Alistair and I aren't legally married. No-fault divorce is coming in 2021. Hooray! I learned all kinds of other exciting things about UK family courts and divorce law for this crack fic, which I then summarily rejected for being inconvenient or boring. Please don't correct my legal terminology. I know, okay? No, actually, it was great. You did spot on. This is set in a vaguely early season 4-ish time period. And then the notes at the end. NB, I choose to believe this is early season 4 and John hasn't listened to the tape of Elias torturing Martin yet. I did Google and there are shockingly few World's West Boss.
World's West Boss.
World's Worst Boss mugs on sale. Cafe Press has one, as does Zazzle, but I feel like there should be a variety in tacky office giftware. Anyway, this was inspired by a comment left in one of my other fics, so I guess feel free to say random shit in the comments because you never know. I might come back in 3 days with a 4K fic. Anyway, if you like this, please do check out my other TMA fics, which are similarly incredulous, serious pieces of literature. I follow Shiny Opals on AO3 so I get notified every time they post something.
This was fantastic.
I loved this. This was amazing.
There was a very, very good brace of brain sorbet.
So hopefully that is going to help everybody sleep a heck of a lot better than they would right immediately after search and rescue.
Okay, so if you like hearing us talk and use interesting word usements like we structure vocally, that is, you can next catch us doing that with the first installment of Stellar, which is Interstellar Exploration and Archaeology, on Sunday between 10 a.m. and 12 noon. Alternatively, there might be another game, but it's looking pretty likely it's going to be Stellar. Then we will be back here next week when we will have an special guest.
That is correct.
My good friend Brendan Connolly, who I've known for years and is an incredibly gifted game designer and mystery fan and podcast now writer. He's working with some folks that he can't talk about yet, and Circles is he's the creator and lead writer on Circles, an excellent, I think, 5-part horror audio fic, which we will put a link to in the show notes.
And he will be our guest next week.
And we will talk to him about mysteries and crime and podcasts and all kinds of good stuff.
I think that's everything that we've got going up.
I think it is.
Yeah, there will be the stream show notes as always. You can find those on Twitter under the hashtag stream show notes, which will contain all the links that we've talked about tonight and sometimes some extra bonusy things. Let's see, our music is by the amazing Ryan Boyd, and I'll put the fan art link in the chat one more time if you were able to join us for fan art at the beginning of the stream.
Thank you to our amazing mods. Thank you to you all for listening to the Raiders.
I'm going to go turn the credits on real quick.
And Margaret's going to go turn the credits on.
Hopefully they're being sent live. All right, have a fantastic...
And I have a Ko-fi, which I don't mention very often.
Oh, thank you, Silver.
Thank you, Silver.
Yeah, that would be lovely too for anybody who's able, but only if you're able. All right. Have a great night, everybody.
Thanks, folks.
We will see you next time.